Whoa, hey you. Ever get that feeling like you're on the edge of something, like really massive?
Oh, yeah.
Today we're tumbling down the rabbit hole of universal basic income UBI. It's like imagine a world where everyone just gets a chunk of cash regularly, no strings attached. Wild, right?
Right. It's a wild thought. So, UBI in a nutshell. Regular cash drops for every single person. Doesn't matter if you're a CEO or chilling at home. Everyone. It's that foundational income everyone gets. Now, that's different from a guaranteed minimum income, which usually comes with hoops to jump through.
Right, conditions and stuff.
Exactly. And even within UBI, we talk about like full UBI enough to really live on versus maybe partial UBI, just a bit extra to help you breathe easier.
Okay. So our mission for this brain adventure, let's peek into the UBI-verse, see what's awesome and what could be a little less awesome.
Yeah, the possibilities and the pitfalls.
We're looking at everything, right? From these kind of wild future ideas to dusty old experiments and some serious number crunching.
Totally. We've got this whole spread of thought experiments, historical context, real-world attempts. It's about seeing UBI from all angles.
What could this mean for you? That's the trip we're on.
That's the key question.
Dude, just the idea of untangling survival from the daily grind, it's kind of beautiful, isn't it?
It really shifts your perspective.
Imagine a future just bursting with creativity because people aren't just chasing a paycheck. Okay, let's unpack this vibe.
Do it.
What even is work gonna look like if AI is doing all the heavy lifting and everyone's got a basic income?
That's the cosmic question, man. Seriously. If robots and AI are handling more and more of the, let's say, economic stuff, we got to redefine what work even means.
Right, value changes.
Maybe we start really valuing the human stuff, making art, connecting with people, empathy, building communities, instead of just cranking out products. Some thinkers even frame this as like a new rule for society. Human-centric value over pure economic output. Rule number one, almost.
So if we're not all stuck in the same old grind, where do we find our spark? What gives us that seminize of purpose?
Totally. That's fundamental. If the traditional job fades a bit, people will likely find meaning in other stuff. It's almost guaranteed.
Like what, though?
Think about just diving deep into learning. Not for a specific job, but just because you're curious.
Yeah.
Or having actual leisure time, not just zoning out, but really engaging with hobbies, passions, community stuff, volunteering, just helping out because you can.
Okay.
And just growing as a person, exploring what makes you tick. Personal development.
I'm picturing people being like, yeah, I'm a professional cloud gazer and volunteer cat cuddler, and that's like a legit contribution.
Maybe. Why not? If it adds to well-being, maybe it is value.
Okay, this is getting wonderfully weird.
Yeah.
But how does this touch the actual economy? Let's talk nuts and bolts. The good stuff UBI could bring.
All right, yeah. One of the big wins everyone talks about is kicking poverty to the curb.
A big one.
Huge. UBI is like a financial trampoline, right? Catching everyone before they hit rock bottom. History shows glimpses of this.
Like where?
Well, way back with the Speenham land system in England, very early days. More recently, the Namibia Basic Income Grant Trial saw poverty drop significantly.
Wow.
Even the Alaska Permanent Fund, that yearly cash handout from oil money, it demonstrably helps keep folks out of poverty. So this basic income floor idea, it seems to consistently show a real impact.
Right on. A safety net's huge, but could UBI actually get the economic engine revving, make things grow?
For sure, there's a solid case for it.
Yeah.
When people have a steady, reliable income, especially lower income folks, they tend to spend it.
On essentials, yeah.
Right, on essentials in their local communities. That juices up the whole economy. We saw this in pilot programs like the ones Give Directly ran in Kenya and Uganda. People earned more, started businesses, lived better.
Okay.
Plus, there's the idea of shrinking that gap between the super rich and everyone else. Less inequality could lead to a more stable, maybe more cohesive society overall.
Now, the big fear. The classic argument. If everyone gets free cash, won't they just become couch potatoes? Stop working.
It's the question everyone asks. But surprisingly, the evidence isn't really pointing that way across the board.
Really?
Yeah. Some studies actually suggest UBI might boost the motivation to work, or at least change the type of work people do.
How so?
Think about it with a basic safety net. You might feel safer taking a leap, starting that business idea you had, going back to school, learning new skills.
Ah, reduces the risk.
Exactly. The Ontario pilot, before it got cut, even saw people saving more, managing debt better. It's about giving people the breathing room to chase opportunities, not just scrambling for any low-wage gig to survive.
Okay.
So the security UBI provides, it might actually unlock potential rather than just encouraging idleness. It's kind of counterintuitive, but the data is interesting.
That completely flips the script, and I can definitely see how one simple universal system could be way smoother than the crazy the mess of welfare programs we have now.
Totally. That's another potential pro. UBI could potentially ditch a lot of those complicated bureaucratic welfare systems, like means testing, paperwork.
The hoops.
Getting rid of that could save a ton on administrative costs. And importantly, cut down on the stigma some people feel when they need help. Just make things way more efficient and, frankly, more dignified.
And with AI, I mean, we keep coming back to it. With AI maybe taking over more jobs, UBI feels almost like a crucial tool, doesn't it, to navigate that future?
Exactly. It's often framed that way. As robots and AI handle more tasks, UBI can be that cushion. It gives people time and resources to maybe retrain, adapt, shift into new roles, whatever those might be.
A transition buffer.
Precisely.
Yeah.
It's acknowledging that tech is fundamentally changing the nature of work, and we need systems to support people through that massive change.
Yeah.
And let's not forget the human side of things. Just meeting basic needs with UBI could seriously boost mental and physical health. Less stress, better nutrition, which has its own economic pluses, right? Healthier people are generally more productive, engage more. We saw some hints of improved health outcomes in the Namibia pilot, for instance.
Okay, wow. The upside sounds pretty sweet, gotta say. But there's always a but. What about the downers? What are the big economic headaches of UBI?
Right, the reality check. The elephant in the room is always the cash, the funding.
Yeah, where does the money come from?
Exactly. Funding UBI at a level that actually makes a difference, a living income, would take serious dough. We're talking trillions in a big economy like the US.
Trillions, okay.
That likely means significantly higher taxes, or completely reallocating huge chunks of government spending, or some combination. Both are politically thorny, to say the least.
Understatement.
Think of it like trying to fund a major national healthcare system, maybe even larger in scale depending on the UBI level. The massive fiscal undertaking.
And then there's the big I word, inflation. Could just dumping more money into the economy make everything rent, food, everything cost a fortune?
It's a legit worry, a major one. Basic economics says if there's significantly more money chasing roughly the same amount of goods and services, prices could definitely go up. Maybe a lot.
Hyperinflation, like the scary stories.
That's the extreme fear. Historical examples like Weimar Germany or Zimbabwe, where money basically became worthless overnight. Those are cautionary tales. Now, UBI isn't the same thing, but the risk of significant inflation is real if it's not managed incredibly carefully.
Right.
One expert we looked at, Ewan Morrison, he worried UBI could become a new zero level if inflation eats away its value. Basically, you get the UBI, but prices rise to match, leaving you no better off.
Oof. Okay. What about that lazy argument again? Even if some studies say otherwise, isn't there still a real chance a lot of people will just bail on working, especially certain jobs?
It's a fair question, and it keeps popping up because it taps into deep-seated beliefs about work and motivation. Critics argue UBI could kill the incentive to work, especially in those lower-paying but often essential jobs.
Like care work, service jobs.
It's exactly. Healthcare, education, agriculture, service industries. If people have a basic income floor, will enough people still want to do those demanding, sometimes unpleasant, often low-paid jobs? It could potentially lead to labor shortages in crucial sectors.
Which creates a whole new set of economic headaches.
Precisely. Supply chain issues, rising costs for essential services.
Yeah.
It's a complex ripple effect.
And could UBI actually make inequality worse in some weird, unexpected way?
It's a tricky point. While UBI aims to shrink income inequality by lifting the bottom, the actual buying power of that basic income could vary wildly.
Cost of living.
Right, $1,000 or whatever the amount is goes a lot further in rural Mississippi than it does in Manhattan. So unless the UBI is adjusted for location, which adds complexity, it could create new kinds of disparities in people's actual standard of living.
Didn't think of that. We also saw some slightly scary talk about UBI potentially leading to elites having more control. That sounds dystopian.
Yeah, that's a concern raised by some thinkers, like Anthony Schmidt. The worry is that a system distributing universal payments could be twisted by powerful groups.
How?
Maybe through the data collected, or by making people dependent on the state or specific corporations controlling the system. It could become a tool for surveillance or social control, maintaining existing power structures instead of truly empowering individuals.
Okay, that's creepy. It highlights how the design is crucial.
Absolutely crucial. Who controls it, how it's delivered, the privacy protections, all massive questions.
And if we're pouring all our resources, all this political will into UBI, what else might we have to ditch? What's the trade-off?
That's the opportunity cost, yeah. The massive funds and political capital needed for UBI could potentially pull money and focus away from other vital public services.
Hi.
Infrastructure, roads, bridges, education funding, scientific research, healthcare improvements, climate change initiatives. It's a huge question of societal priorities. Where do we put our collective resources?
Right, you can't do everything.
Not usually, no. Especially not on this scale.
Lastly, it just feels like no matter how many trials we run in Stockton or Finland, rolling out UBI nationwide or even globally, that's still a massive unknown, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's probably the biggest caveat. While those smaller pilot programs give us valuable clues, taking UBI national is a whole different beast. The scale is different, the economic interactions are different.
Unpredictable.
Largely, yes. We just don't have a crystal ball to see the long-term effects on employment rates, on inflation, on social dynamics, on innovation, on how people fundamentally behave decades down the line.
Yeah.
It remains a massive experiment with potentially huge unforeseen consequences.
So, definitely not a magic wand. UBI is. It's a seriously complex idea. It could trigger some major shifts in society way beyond just the dollars and cents in our pockets.
For sure.
Let's dive into some of that broader societal ripple effect, because it sounds like UBI could really shake up the very fabric of how we live together.
Right. If we're seriously looking at a world with widespread UBI, maybe alongside advanced AI, we'd likely need to rethink our whole social contract. It goes way beyond just the money.
How so?
Well, the idea of UBI often goes hand in hand with seeing other things as basic human rights too. Things like healthcare, decent housing, maybe even internet access, not just commodities you buy if you can afford them.
Universal basic services alongside income.
Kind of, yeah. Some of the future-oriented principles we looked at lay this out explicitly. Strong social safety nets covering these core needs are essential. UBI alone might not be enough.
Makes sense. If income is partly disconnected from jobs, you got to make sure those fundamentals are still covered for everyone. What about how we actually run things? Governments? Democracy?
Sources suggest our democratic processes might need a serious upgrade too. They need to be more inclusive, more responsive.
Especially for who?
Especially for folks whose lives are most disrupted by AI automation, or people finding new roles outside traditional work thanks to UBI.
So what does that look like?
Could mean more direct citizen involvement in decisions, maybe using digital platforms more effectively, making government feel less remote, more connected, more representative of this changing society.
Interesting.
And thinking about it, empowering citizens with basic economic security through UBI could actually lead to more engagement in civic life.
Right.
If you're not constantly stressed about survival.
You have the bandwidth to participate.
Exactly. More time, more mental energy to actually engage with the community and politics.
Feels like these aren't just local or national issues either, AI and UBI.
Right.
They feel like they'd have global shockwaves, right? Affect everyone.
Totally. Global teamwork becomes even more crucial. We need serious cooperation on things like AI regulations, how do we ensure it's developed ethically everywhere, data privacy standards across borders, how the global economy adapts.
Wow.
We might see new international agreements, maybe even new global organizations trying to manage these huge interconnected challenges fairly so some countries don't get left behind.
And with AI being so central to this whole picture, how do we make sure it's actually, helping us and not taking over or being misused?
Ethical AI governance is completely non-negotiable in this future. It has to be baked in from the start.
Mean what, practically?
Meaning things like transparency, knowing how these AI systems make decisions,
Yeah.
accountability, who's responsible when an AI messes up, and actively preventing just a few giant companies from cornering the entire AI market and holding all the power.
Right, avoid monopolies.
Yeah. It's about deliberately shaping AI development so it benefits everyone, not just a select few.
It's almost like we'd need a whole new infrastructure, a new backbone to even make UBI work smoothly in the real world.
You nailed it.
Yeah.
That's rule number 8 in some frameworks. We need super reliable, accessible, easy-to-use systems for digital payments.
Secure too.
Absolutely secure. And robust identity verification so everyone who's entitled to the basic income actually gets it, and gets it easily, whether they're tech-savvy or not. Digital inclusion is key.
And we touched on AI sucking up so much energy earlier. That's going to tie into the UBI picture somehow, right? How do we power all this?
Absolutely. That's another big one, often framed as Rule 9. Switching rapidly to sustainable, clean energy sources becomes even more critical.
Why more?
Well, you've got the massive energy demands of widespread AI computation. Plus, potentially, UBI might lead to increased consumption overall, at least initially. Meeting those energy needs without completely frying the planet is a major piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, no kidding. Ultimately, though, beyond the tech and the policy, it feels like we would all need a serious mind shift to really get on board with UBI and all the changes it implies.
Exactly. That's maybe the biggest hurdle, or Rule 10 if you like. Getting broad public acceptance for these huge transformations, both AI and UBI, is absolutely key.
How do you even do that?
It means open, honest conversations, explaining the potential benefits clearly, but also acknowledging and addressing the real fears people have. It means challenging some really old, ingrained ideas about the value of work, about what success looks like.
Letting go of the 9-to-5 ideal as the only way.
Pretty much. It's about helping people see this potential future, not just as some scary disruption, but maybe as a chance to build something better, freer, more equitable. It's a cultural shift as much as an economic one.
It's wild to think about. UBI could unlock so much human potential, not just for like our own hobbies and passions, but maybe for tackling the really big collective problems we face.
Yeah.
Climate change, disease.
Maybe even some good old-fashioned cosmic pondering, as you said.
Yeah, stargazing. Okay, let's zoom out a bit. Where did this whole UBI idea even come from? It feels very futuristic, but you said it has history.
Oh yeah, the core idea, just giving people some money, no strings attached, as a foundation goes way back.
Like how far back?
Think ancient Rome.
Yeah.
You had Julius Caesar, other emperors doing grain doles, sometimes cash handouts to citizens. It wasn't UBI, but it's an early form of unconditional support.
Okay.
Then jump forward to the 1500s. Sir Thomas More, in his book Utopia, described a society with guaranteed income elements.
Utopia, right?
And in the 1700s, Thomas Paine, the American revolutionary writer, proposed a sort of citizen's dividend paid from a national fund derived from land rents. It had pieces of what we now call basic income. So no, this isn't some brand newfangled idea cooked up last week in Silicon Valley.
So definitely not a recent invention, huh? Who else picked it up?
Nope. Throughout the 1800s and early 1900s, you had thinkers like Henry George, who advocated for land value tax to fund a citizen's dividend, and philosophers like Bertrand Russell, who saw basic income as key to freeing people for creative pursuits in a more automated future.
Bertrand Russell, wow.
Yeah. And even in the late 20th century, someone you might not expect, Milton Friedman, the free market economist, proposed a negative income tax.
How did that work?
Basically, if your income fell below a certain level, the government wouldn't tax you. They'd pay you the difference. It's kind of UBI's pragmatic cousin, aimed at simplifying welfare and reducing poverty without distorting markets too much, in his view.
Okay, so a long intellectual history, but what's making UBI such a hot topic again right now? Why all the buzz?
I think the big catalyst now is the rapid rise of automation, AI, robotics, and the very real anxiety about widespread job displacement. Are robots going to take all the jobs?
The million-dollar question.
Exactly. And seeing influential, high-profile people, tech figures like Elon Musk, politicians like Andrew Yang during his presidential run championing UBI, has really thrown it into the mainstream spotlight.
Gets people talking.
Definitely. There's this growing feeling, I think, that the nature of work is changing fundamentally and fast, and maybe our old economic models won't cut it. We need to seriously explore different ways to ensure economic security.
And we've actually seen some attempts to make UBI or something like it a reality, right? Not just theory.
Yeah.
What are some of the big experiments people point to?
Definitely. There's a whole history of trying out different versions in the real world. Going back again in the 1960s and 70s, there were several fairly large-scale negative income tax experiments in the US and Canada.
Okay.
And the Minkum experiment in Dauphin, Manitoba in the 70s is quite famous. It provided a guaranteed minimum income to residents.
What happened there?
Well, analysis showed modest reductions in work hours, mainly for new mothers and teenagers staying in school longer, but also improvements in health outcomes, like fewer hospitalizations.
Interesting. What about more recently?
More recently, Namibia had that basic income grant pilot in Ajivero Omatara from 2008-2009, which showed positive impacts on poverty, health, and schooling. India had pilots run by Siwa and Madhya Pradesh around 2011-2012. Brazil had a municipal basic income law passed in 2009 in Quintango.
And Iran. You mentioned Iran.
Yeah, Iran is fascinating. In 2010, they basically replaced a bunch of energy and food subsidies with a near universal cash transfer system. It's one of the closest things to a nationwide UBI currently operating, though born from subsidy reform.
Wow. I remember hearing about Finland and Ontario trying UBI too. What have we learned from those? They got a lot of attention.
Right. The Finnish experiment from 2017-2018 gave about 2,000 unemployed people a basic income instead of their regular unemployment benefits unconditionally.
And the result?
The results were mixed or modest, depending on how you read them. People didn't necessarily find jobs at a higher rate, but they reported significantly better well-being. Less stress, better health, more confidence in the future.
Okay, well-being is important. And Ontario.
The Ontario Basic Income pilot, started in 2017, was designed to be larger, covering low-income people in several communities. But unfortunately, a new government canceled it early in 2018.
Politics.
Politics. So we lost the chance for longer-term data, but initial reports suggested improvements in health, housing stability, and even some people pursuing education or better work. We're still digging into the full results from the data collected, but these pilots give us valuable, real-world data points, even if incomplete.
And there have been even more recent experiments popping up, haven't there? Seems like momentum is building.
Yeah, the conversation and the actual on-the-ground testing have really ramped up lately, especially in the U.S. At the city level. We've seen numerous guaranteed income projects. Cities like Stockton, California, that one got a lot of press. Compton, Tacoma, Hudson, New York, Chicago, Cook County. Many focusing on specific populations, often funded philanthropically.
And the UK?
Yeah, even the UK is planning trials now, I think in Jarrow and East Finchley. It really shows there's a growing global hunger to understand what UBI actually looks like when the rubber meets the road.
We also touched on things like the Alaska Permanent Fund and Brazil's Bolsa Familia. They're not pure UBI, but they have some similar vibes, right? They fit into this picture.
Exactly. They're important reference points. The Alaska Fund gives that yearly dividend check to nearly all residents from state oil revenues. The amount changes year to year. It's not monthly, but it's pretty universal for residents.
Macau, too, you mentioned.
Right. Macau has a similar wealth partaking scheme, funded by casino profits. Again, annual, near universal.
And Bolsa Familia.
Brazil's Bolsa Familia is a bit different. It's a large conditional cash transfer program. It gives cash to low-income families. But if they meet certain conditions, like keeping their kids vaccinated and in school.
So conditions, not UBI.
It's pure UBI, no. But it's a massive, influential program showing how regular cash payments, even conditional ones, can be effectively delivered and have major impacts on poverty and human development in a large country. They all show different facets of how cash transfer policies can work.
Okay. So after all this digging, history, pilots, pros, cons, let's try to boil it down. Quick recap. What are the core arguments for pushing ahead with UBI? The big selling points.
Okay, the core arguments for UBI, in a nutshell, are usually: 1, major potential for poverty reduction and increased financial security for everyone, a real floor.
Yep.
2, potential economic stimulus through increased consumer spending, maybe even entrepreneurship. 3, enhanced individual freedom, autonomy, and opportunity, the ability to say no to bad jobs, pursue education, care for family.
Okay.
4, a way to adapt our economy and society to widespread automation and the changing nature of work. And 5, potential improvements in public health and overall well-being by reducing the chronic stress of poverty.
Got it. Powerful arguments. And on the flip side, the counter-arguments. The big flashing warning signs or reasons against UBI.
The main concerns against it tend to be: 1, the enormous cost and the challenge of funding it. Where does the money come from without crippling taxes or slashing other services?
The big one.
The big one. 2, the risk of significant inflation eroding the value of the UBI and potentially harming the economy. 3, the worry, persistent despite pilot data, about potential negative impacts on labor supply and work incentives. The will people stop working question.
Right.
4, the practical implementation hurdles, setting up a massive, secure, efficient delivery system. And 5, the potential for unforeseen negative consequences and the sheer uncertainty of such a massive societal shift. It's unproven at scale.
It really is a tightrope walk, isn't it? Weighing these huge potential benefits against some very real, very daunting challenges.
Absolutely. There are no easy answers here.
It definitely feels like UBI is one of those genuinely transformative ideas. It could reshape the future in a massive way, maybe for better, maybe for worse, maybe some messy, complicated mix of both.
That seems likely. A messy mix.
It's clearly not some simple utopian dream, but a deeply complex proposal with a lot of moving parts, a lot of interdependencies. And ultimately, you, listening right now, you're part of this huge ongoing conversation. These aren't just abstract theories. These are the kinds of ideas that could fundamentally shape the world we all live in, maybe sooner than we think.
It's important to engage with them.
Totally. So here's a final thought to chew on, maybe until our next deep dive. Imagine that future where, when someone asks, so what do you do? The honest answer might be, well, what don't I do?
Right.
And maybe our biggest societal challenge isn't generating wealth, but figuring out how to best channel all that unleashed human energy, creativity, and connection in that kind of UBI future. What possibilities get you the most excited? What potential are you buzzing about? That's what I want you to think about.